We have no sound. Sorry, one moment. We'll just get that fixed.
Take two. Hello, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Adeshola, the SCA's Chief People Officer. I'll be hosting today's panel on retail technology, not because I'm a technological whiz myself, but because I know how important it is to create tools that help people work and communicate more effectively with one another, whether they're colleagues or a barista and a customer. In this panel, we will hear from 3 companies that have invested in technology that has helped them with quality control, led to greater efficiencies in their businesses, and connected them to their customers in new ways. I'm looking forward to hear from each of them and looking forward to hearing from you all in the chat about what most resonates with you and what you would all like to learn from the panelists. Let me introduce them so we can start the conversation. So I'm going to start with Ron Schuler. Ron Schuler is the COO of Joe Coffee Company. Before being named COO in May 2021, Ron was Joe Coffee's Vice President of Operations and was responsible for all the company's retail sales and operations, training and education, along with service and support. Prior to joining Joe Coffee, Ron held multiple roles with Starbucks, including the role of Regional Director for Starbucks in New York City market. Before he got into coffee, Ron also spent 5 years with Target, most recently as District Manager in Long Island, New York. Ron, thank you so much for being here. I'd next like to introduce as well, Damien Durda. Damien is a partner at Nemesis Coffee in Vancouver, BC, in Canada. Originally from Poland, Damien manages the sourcing and quality control for the roasting program at Nemesis. And he is also a partner of Ratnagiri Estate in India. Welcome, Damien. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Sam Spillman. Sam is the Director of Coffee and Customer Experience at Cafe Vita, coffee roasting company, based in Seattle, Washington. She's also the 2019 US Barista Champion. So I'd like to give a warm welcome to all our panelists, and I hope you're all well today. Would you like to just put your cameras on and show everyone your lovely faces? So, welcome to this panel. Everyone in the audience, if you do have any questions at any point, please put them in the chat and I will at some point hopefully get around to ask those questions for you. So I'm really going to start based on the new technology. So new technology seeks to improve consistency, profitability, and efficiency. Is there a particular area in the coffee shop or roasting process that technology has made a significant impact to your business? If so, please can you talk about the previous challenges that led to the implementation, type of technology you were using, and how you identified the type of technology required? I'll angle that at Ron first, and then if Damien's got some time after to answer, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Elizabeth. I guess a little bit of going back to the past of where we were in thinking about the POS technology in the cafe space, and I'll use that to branch off into how we've used technology to move that forward. we were sort of segregated in that we had multiple POS systems and across our cafes, which is very unusual to see two different POS operating systems in one single company. So one of the things we needed to do was to streamline that first to ensure that we had consistent data, that we were comparing apples to apples to some degree, and the efficiency of that process as well. And so one of the things we needed to look at was not only resolving that, but also thinking about the experience and how it would evolve with the customer experience, and all the things that come along with technology with respect to touchless payment, ordering ahead. And so looking for a POS system that would allow us to not only resolve our issue of a separated system, but also put us in a place where we were poised to really take advantage of technology in a different way that would allow us to create a seamless experience for the customer, a much improved system for our employees, and then even for our business to make better decisions, a better data set that we could use that was very clear across our entire platform in order to bring that forward. And so we used the restaurant system Toast in order to bring that forward for us. And it's been a good decision for us in moving forward from the fragmented system that we had in place prior.
Hi, thank you for the question. In our case, we were looking for the software which can implement different aspects of our business. Me as a green coffee buyer, I'm looking for traceability and easy access, quick access to the information that I need. So implementation of the software was probably the major improvement in our system. I can now track all the samples that I'm purchasing from my partners at origin. I can see those samples executed in the roastery, and then the same QR code or QC code can be analyzed at our stores in Vancouver, Canada. And also our e-commerce system includes the same QR code, so we can rely on that code regards to the feedback. So implementation of that software was probably the major advantage and the key point in our business.
Sorry, I keep forgetting about the mute button. During the implementation for Ron and Damien, did you find that there were any significant challenges that could have been avoided? And if there were any, could you speak to those and give some advice to our audience?
Damien, if you want to go first, you're already, we'll continue your story.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ron. We were actively working with the software developer to be able to implement the system in different areas. So actively resolving those problems at the very early stage helped us, develop the system, which is working perfectly for us. We didn't have any major problems developing that software or using it or using different advantages of that software, rather than us before launching that software, we were just implementing every single step or detail along the way.
Okay. Thank you, Damien.
Yeah, I would say similarly in the cafe experience was the software, whether it be from instruction, because it was also taking an organization through how to use a different POS software system. And so I think the big challenge for us was that transition for our culture of a different POS system to a standard POS system that allowed a lot of the things that we wanted to do functional wise in menu control, looking at how we, account for transactions and using that data around purchase activity for our customer. So all those things were really great for us to use. I think the last one was probably the hardware and looking at the application in our stores, because each one of our cafes has a different POS area setup. And so we couldn't just use one single 14-inch monitor, one single credit card reader. And so all those things had to be looked at almost individually. And so we didn't want to lose too much efficiency, but those are just some of those sort of hurdles that we navigated through the implementation.
Okay, thank you for that. And I'm going to now angle this more to Sam. So with implementation of technology, you've obviously had to have some implementations at Cafe Vita. For you, has technology enhanced your coffee shop or the cafe shop or the roasting experience for your staff? And has it also improved the experience for your customers? Which would you say has more, which would you say has had a more significant impact?
I would say it's honestly been equal. So our biggest focus is always improving quality of the product that we're giving our guests, but also creating, and it's the name of my role, but a great customer experience. We want people to feel like Vita is their home when they come in. So a part of that is the different uses that we've used technology on, like the roasting and the QC side, has really helped in ensuring quality within the cafes, while the technology that we've implemented behind the bar has really helped with focusing on the customer experience. So for instance, for the roasting side, implementing Cropster from, like Damien was saying, with samples and being able to track that and see those samples work into our inventory. And then also doing like QC cuppings, quality cuppings that we can attach to the roast profiles, and also tracking our recipes to make sure the recipes are being followed. On the cafe side, using things like the espresso machines with gravimetrics, puck press to help so you can ensure that heads up service so you're always engaged with the guest. And then also, I mean, I would even point to our POS system, where it's a very like easy thing for the customer to engage in, and very little work for the barista behind the bar.
Okay. And I guess that's been more efficient, especially for the baristas. I've got a question from the audience. What is the main differentiating factors that you experience with Toast versus other POS systems? And I'm believing that's more directed to Ron.
Yeah, one of the things that we really were looking for was, I think Sam even touched on it, is a simplified process for the barista, while at the same time providing us with the robust data collection that we wanted to know behind the scenes. And so we could be very granular to look at our data and saying, and this would feed into green coffee buying. And so what's selling, what's really being driven by the customer demand. And so we could understand what coffee choices, roast choices were being selected by our customer. And so that robust data set behind the scenes was critical for us to understand so that we can make better decisions. But it didn't need to be so complicated that you needed to have a 20-button process to transact on a coffee purchase. And so we wanted to look for both of those things. And that was a differentiating factor for us, was that robust back end, at the same time being simplistic in order to transact, as well as make edits when we needed to, because we were always updating as we source new coffees. And so that ability to make those changes were probably those 3 bullet points that we were looking at from differentiating systems.
Okay, and having heard all of you with your points on that, and it involves a team, it involves a lot of people, it involves implementation, it involves bringing a team in and having the projects run out. How did you get the buy-in and support of your team workers in aiding the success of the transformation?
I guess I'll respond to that.
No
worries. I mean, I think exactly what a little bit of what you shared earlier was thinking about and talking about what did each of those departments need to have in order to make the best decisions? What did our marketing team need to understand in order to be directional, and what audiences we were reaching, and were we effective in the campaigns that we were running to excite our customers? Same thing with our green coffee buying. And so that we didn't want to purchase coffee that we didn't have an audience for. And so we didn't want the waste of coffee, because we had a great relationship from farm to cup. And so we wanted to make sure that we were making smart purchasing decisions, but also providing something new for a customer. And then just from our barista and our operational team, I think touching on earlier about the simplistic POS process and at point of sale, and being able to have a conversation with the customer without always having to look down because you're trying to find that obscure button for an item. And so how do we make all those things? So everyone sort of came to the table of the things that were critical in order for them to be successful. And I think as we were addressing those items and the fact that we could provide a solution for that, that engagement just continued continue to grow as those areas were being addressed.
Okay. And Damien and Sam, do you have any other perspectives as well from your teams and how you kept them engaged with the process and also, I would say, had buy-in?
Yeah. So here's the deal. Cafe Vita is a 25-year-old company, and we have members of our team that have been here from the very beginning to members of the team that have joined during the pandemic. So we have a mixed crowd. So when approaching like implementation of new technology, I have found the best success and the best buy-in I could get is by putting myself in their shoes and finding a reason why it would benefit them. And even though like I feel almost kind of like a mom sometimes because I'm like, okay, I know this is going to be great for the company. I know it's going to benefit our team. I know our product is going to be so good, but I could tell someone that and that they want to know like, okay, but how does this affect me? So with our baristas, for instance, when we're implementing new technology, it's like, hey, look at this. Now you don't have to do this thing. Now this is going to make it easier for you. Now you're like, I mean, at the end of the day, like our baristas, a majority of our baristas are passionate about what they're doing, but it is a job. So it gets tiring and taxing. And so being able to say, hey, now you have this puck press, so you don't have to put all of, put your back into it when you're tamping your coffee every single time. And with our roasters, it's like, now we don't have to like meet every single week. You can just look at the notes that we provided through Copster to make the adjustments that you need with your team. So I always start with like the reason why it will benefit that individual person, that team, and then lead into, and now look at what this does for the company.
Okay. Thank you, Sam, for that perspective. Damien?
I can definitely relate to some and repeat a lot of what she said. In our case, I guess it was finding a system which could connect us all, and specifically my nature of work, it's being mostly outside of the company. So we had to choose an option which will be sufficient for every single department. And mentioned by Sam, Cropster was giving us this possibility to be able to see, the sample department and green inventory department, the roast department, and then the quality control department. Knowing that every single person inside the platform, inside the software can use that as well, we were easily able to communicate on every single small detail to tweak in. Also with the green coffee purchases, the recent communication I have had with my beautiful team was just 1 hour after the cupping of amazing microlots, I could excitingly share my cupping notes with my team, and they could see it in the couple of minutes after the session. So I guess implementing that technology was important for internal communication.
Thank you for that, Damien. And I'm still going to stick on the same aspect. Were there any not even significant, were there any challenges that you felt? What challenges did you encounter with this implementation, actually? If you did encounter any. Damien, I'll start with you.
Am I happy or lucky to say we didn't have any challenges? We quite, frankly speaking, knew what we wanted to implement. So the challenges, I guess maybe one tiny little factor could be mentioned was not even a hesitance, but maybe a fear of something unknown, and the software and the technology, which is very broad, very complex, and can be used in many different aspects. So maybe this sort of challenge can be mentioned as this technology. It's new for many people, and maybe can be scary for some of them. Could be the one.
Do so. Sam?
Just kind of going off what Damien's saying, like anything new can be scary for a lot of people. So I think we avoided a lot of those challenges and pushback because we made sure that when implementing these products that we had all the resources prepared to use those products properly, and really clear instruction of how to use these products, no matter what it was, from Cropster to how to clean the puck press properly, how to use a puck press, how to dial in your gravimetrics. And then the next thing that I think our team did really, really well, it really, I want to celebrate my team here, is that the follow through or the follow up that they provided with these new products, like our retail team going through with the managers and making sure they understand everything and diving deep into it with them. And then also with our training team going into that element with the roasters, and then also our retail for how to properly utilize this technology. So I think we avoided a lot of challenges and honestly didn't really experience a lot of pushback or anything. And I think the biggest challenges were probably just like to the nature of new equipment, just figuring it out and understanding how it works and how to best utilize it. But yeah.
Thank you, Sam. Ron?
Yeah, I think what Damien and Sam said, I would probably echo those sentiments. And the one thing I would add to that is that on the back end, I think the problem resolution, having a very clear strategy about when things don't work well, what's the step to do? Because it can be frustrating. Technology can be wonderful and it can be frustrating. And as you're implementing those new systems, when things don't work, and you can certainly lose the momentum of that transition. And so I think it's having a very clear support structure in place that resolves things in a timely fashion. And sometimes it's also being transparent that maybe this is a new problem that wasn't anticipated. And so I think when you can connect those dots and the team understands and sees what's happened to support them in this process, they will continue to support the momentum of the transition. So I'd say echo the things that were shared, and then just thinking strongly about that problem resolution on the back end.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got another question from the audience. So you each seem to represent larger, mature businesses. Do you have a perspective on newer small batch roasters that facilitate in-store roasting in the cafe? I will start with Damien on that one.
Thank you. Great question. My business is medium to small as well. We have a roastery connected to our shop, which includes a lot of problems, but it also includes a lot of advantages, like faster, quicker communication within the team, front of the house. I don't think there is particular problem with having a small business in regards to investing in technology, but I also think that investing in technology at the first place, looking for opportunities to improve your business and trying to find platform softwares or technology to improve efficiency is probably the key aspect at the beginning of the business that can definitely avoid many others problems along the way.
Sam.
So we're a larger business, but our Portland facility is a cafe roastery, and where they're attached. But I would say, as a small business or a startup company, some of these technologies and software may not seem necessary at where you're at because of your size, but you should be planning for the next 5, for the next 10 years, for the next 15 years. And in that, you don't want to get to a point where you're like 10 years from now, you're larger and you don't have the foundation to really fall onto. So start building that foundation using those technologies now, even if it's like, it seems kind of redundant, or like you're actually doing multiple jobs as it is with a smaller operation. There's a lot of people are doing a lot more roles and kind of umbrellaing, I'm using that as a verb, a lot of roles. So it seems like a little redundant, but taking those extra steps to follow a system and a process within a software is going to really lay that foundation for you to grow for the future.
Thank you, Sam. Ron?
Yeah, even as an organization where we've got 20 plus locations across the New York City market, we actually looked at testing an in-store roaster, and we started that process, and so we learned a lot about ourselves and our structure, and so I think it's having a clear plan, as Sam said, having a clear strategy about what you want to achieve and how you want that experience to be um, managed in the location. I think those are pieces. I think the quality control is a key one with respect to sourcing and what you will bring into the store and being able to have the space to execute. And so I think it's one where having that well thoughtful strategy, as with any other sort of avenue that you pursue, is having a great plan of what you hope to do that's flexible enough to adjust to what the business demand is. And so it is a technology that we believe in, and we'll certainly, dip our toe back into it. I think it's one right now where we are learning from the process that we started with the single cafe and we've pulled back at this time. But I think it's one where we'll reapproach.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, with technology mitigating the need to face-to-face, please comment on pros and cons. Full disclosure, I'm a face-to-face fan. I guess this is a member of the audience that really just wants to understand, like, removing that face-to-face, and technology taking that place. What do you think that effect is on the business, on your consumers, on your community? What are the pros and cons? I didn't direct that to anyone again.
No worries.
Start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an enhancement, and so it's a different avenue. And so when you think about different roasts of coffee are designed to appeal to different palates of taste. And so when you think about our customers, they might want to interact with you in very different ways. And so this becomes another avenue in order to meet that need. So there's a customer that chooses to order ahead, pick up and leave the cafe, and to be able to do that. And so what can also be a pro to that is when you think about the experience in the cafe, it should also begin at the door. And so it may be a welcome to that customer who may never reach the POS. They'll just come and pick up a coffee. But if we are able to approach and say hello at the door, that sort of interaction still exists. And then for the customer that chooses to continue to take advantage of that face-to-face, then making sure that you're still investing in that experience and making that a wonderful hospitable experience when they come into the cafe. And so I don't know if it's necessarily sacrificing one or the other. I think it's really understanding your customer and meeting them where they are and doing best to both of them to the best of your ability.
Thank you, Ron. I'll take that through to Sam. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's honestly, just to Ron's point, like technology is allowing us to interact with the customers more intentionally. I even hate the word customers, but like interact with our guests more intentionally. Being able to have conversation and not be so pulled into what you're doing behind the bar is just such an added value that technology can help with. And don't get me wrong, like I'm using the puck press as a big example because we just did this recently in all our stores. And if you don't know what a puck press is, it automatically tamps the coffee for you. So you insert it, you can set the pressure, and it tamps the coffee the same every single time for espresso. But with this, I've had baristas say, oh, well, like, I feel like my craft is being taken away. And it's like, no, the craft of what you're doing is, yes, making coffee, but it's creating an experience for your guests. So I think a lot of these technologies and softwares even can allow us to have more intentional time with our guests. And maybe it is a little shorter with having like Joe to Go, or we use a Ready app in our stores. We just launched it like last week. But when you do have those interactions, they're more intentional. And for on the back of house, I feel like with my team, I've been able to have more intentional meetings with my team because we are always talking about through the software, we're talking about the nitty gritty of like our profiles and things like that. So when we do meet, it's like we can talk about bigger goals. We can set goals for the next quarter, the next 6 months, the next year, and talk about those higher level things. And just really check in on how the day-to-day stuff is going. So I think I don't really see any cons to technology. I think if anything, it just allows and gives us more space to interact with, have more intentional interactions with our guests and our teams.
Thank you, Sam, for that. Damien, do you have some input for
I
that as
could
well?
Absolutely. I could only add technology as being an advantage, considering my nature of work. Green coffee buying during the pandemic time has switched firstly to the communication through the internet, so the technology could help us facilitate the relationships that we have or are having. So I think there are no cons. The big plus for how we could communicate during the pandemic and how we could survive during the pandemic. Also, many companies switched to the whole power to the e-commerce sector, which is now probably majority of their business. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Damien. So my next question again is from the audience, and I'm just going to go straight into Sam because I feel like I always start with Damien or Ron. So Sam, thoughts on transition to super automatics? Everseas, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is coming out with some truly incredible machines. By automating too much, are we losing some of the art? What's the balance in managing barista fatigue, consistency, and losing the authenticity of the product?
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's been a very consistent conversation within our team and then also within the industry of what's too much as far as automizing the whole process. In my opinion, I think that there's really, as long as it's producing, because here's the deal, humans are highly inconsistent, especially with a product that is extremely inconsistent. So if we are able to automize this and create technologies that are going to create consistency that is way higher than what a human can do, then I think that is a huge pro. There still has to be a mind behind the technology in order to use and maximize what you're getting from that technology. So even with super automatics, like you still have to think about what's happening, the extraction, the science behind it to get the results that you want. So I don't think that technology is necessarily replacing the barista in any way. I think if anything, it's allowing the barista to fully use and utilize their brain strength for what they know about the coffee and what they're trying to achieve with the coffee. So I've never, I mean, unless we just put a robot behind the machine and then like call it a day and then we don't have baristas, that's where I'd probably draw the line. But because baristas, like we need our baristas. They're the ones creating the interactions with the guests. They're the ones that are the brainchild of the espresso and making sure that the espresso is tasting as good as it can taste. But if we can implement equipment that's going to help them achieve their goals, that's a huge win.
Thank you, Sam. Ron?
I'm not sure I could do much better than what Sam just shared about that experience. I think I completely agree. I think the one component that is still there is that face-to-face contact that we were just talking about a few minutes ago. And so that barista connection with the customer guest, it's still important to the process. And so as much as we can produce the greatest cup of coffee from a quality perspective, that connection, that human connection is still a part of the craft. And that for me doesn't get, removed when you start talking about this automating the process. So I think, underscore everything that Sam had shared about the machine itself and that piece of it. And then just add on that the last component that I think is just as critical is that connection and that human interaction.
Thank you, Ron. Damien, would you like to add to that?
Unfortunately, I have no experience with RSS machines. I guess I would definitely echo the sentiment of importance of having face-to-face interaction with customers. I do not have anything major to add.
No worries, Damien. Thank you for that one. I'm going to ask you my next question. Has a business owner who has yet to open a cafe, and this has come from the audience, so has a business owner who has yet to open a cafe, one thing I find difficult is how to filter and make decisions on new technologies that may have an impact but is difficult to calculate. Do you have any tips on how to filter and make strategic decisions on adopting technologies, especially in the early stages of planning a business?
I would say research. There are plenty of platforms and softwares available. The platforms or technologies are offering different systems and different opportunities like subscription service or different pricing plans. I think what has to be done at the beginning of the business is the idea of which direction we want to take, and what kind of system we would need or have in the business. Every single decision that has been made at Nemesis has been implemented with broad conversation within the team, and we were carefully selecting every single software, comparing different pricing plans, possibilities, having multiple video calls with software developers, and just fine tuning, comparing, and then having those details written down somewhere on the paper and making smart decisions which software or which platform or which technology it's fitting to our business, and making those decisions upon specific strategy. It's important.
Thank you, Damien, for that. Sam, would you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a pretty daunting process, especially if you're looking to open a cafe. There's so many technologies out there. There's so many equipment options, and then it's easy to get lost in. So I would first identify like what your goal is, what you want to achieve through your cafe, the style of service that you want to achieve in your cafe. And then I would fill in the gaps from there. I would echo what Damien said about research. Just do a ton of research. Talk to people that own cafes, and try to learn from their experience too. And like an example, like I'm not going to tell you that there's like one espresso machine that you have to get and it's the best one you have to use. Like there's so many great options out there. So I would talk to people that that have owned a cafe and have had that experience. And then I would hesitate to jump on a new equipment that has just launched. I like to see like the next iteration come out, to see like the fixes and the things that they do to that equipment to make it better. New launch of equipment, it can be a little scary because there's not a lot of history on that new piece of equipment or that new model, and there's not a lot of in the field experience with it. So new equipment is great, but make sure that there's enough to read about it to know that it's going to be a success in your cafe. That's my advice. I also, anything to help with the flow of communication is really helpful. So having technology, honestly, I'm blanking out on the name of it, but having a screen where the orders transferred to the screen where the baristas are making the coffee to help with communication and speed behind the bar. Things like that can help with communication and create a faster order to service time.
Thank you, Sam. Ron, do you have any additions?
I think the one thing I would just add, as you're sort of doing the research and going through all those things, I think what Damon and Sam said are right on point. I think the one piece that you will always sort of think about is where the finances are and what you can do with the business. And so understanding the budget about what you want to accomplish, because to what everyone said so far, and there's a lot of technology out there. There's a lot of different equipment. There's a lot of different expensive equipment out there that you may or may not need. And so I think that research will help you, and that budget will be a guidepost as to how elaborate do you want to get? What's that vision and experience that you hope to accomplish. I think you keeping those things close at hand will help you as you go through that research.
Thanks, Ron. You really talk about budget as well and understanding, and this is me going off not from an audience perspective, but the budget and understanding what you need and what you have room for. Is there, aside as business leaders, who do you consult for that, especially for the people that don't have a team? It's just them individually. What advice do you have for them? Sorry, again, I didn't direct that. I'll go with Sam first.
Can you repeat the question?
So in terms of budget and understanding the finances of the business and what's out there and what they would need for the business, for sole business owners that don't have a team around them to help support them and give them advice, or have people externally to advise them, what advice would you give them in aligning a budget to their technology needs?
Yeah, I would. I think it's good to know what to prioritize and building your budget around that. To be honest with you, I've never opened my own cafe or a company. So I would have to figure that out for myself of like who I trust within that. But as far as things that you're going to want to prioritize, you want to prioritize the core equipment that you're going to be using. So espresso machine and grinders. These are things that like I wouldn't necessarily try to find like a deal on OfferUp or like a cheaper option. You definitely want to invest in something that you know that it's like buying a new car. You don't know the history of how that machine was upkept. So it's better to make that bigger investment into that equipment up front. Now there's definitely options in a spectrum of price ranges. So as far as identifying your budget, I don't know what to offer other than turning to people that you trust.
Thank you, Sam. Ron, since you had mentioned the budget piece.
I think this is part of that fun research. I would say visit coffee shops. Go to every single coffee shop you can possibly visit and talk to the barista, see what the customer experience is like, understand what's there. And that may also inform your vision, but it also might allow you to think about things that you would want to do different. And I think to Sam's point, that may be the area where you choose to invest. What are those things that are most critical and important to you? And if it's truly about the quality of the espresso and what you're extracting, then that may be where you heavily lean in. If it's something different, then you might say, well, maybe I don't go with the most expensive model. I go with one less model because I'm going to invest in another area of the business that I believe in. So I would say this is the fun research. Go drink coffee, go visit cafes and understand those experiences, and then take that to then have those more intimate conversations with other industry experts about what their experiences have been.
Thank you, Ron. Damien.
I could not prioritize more training over equipment. So I think budgeting smartly and investing in yourself is a must and number one. And then starting with equipment, which can be a little bit cheaper, maybe not so advanced, but learning basics with this equipment would be sort of like a budgeting planning, and you know, I cannot again prioritize investing in yourself, in training, developing your skills more.
Thank you, Damien. I've now got a audience question. It's more focused on e-commerce. So what % of your business is e-commerce versus in-store now that we're on the other side of 2020? I don't want to say the C word. How much staff do you dedicate to e-commerce marketing? Would also love to hear what important subscriptions play as part of e-commerce. Sorry, again, Ron, would you be able to answer that for us?
Yeah, I think our business, no different than anyone, as we went through the pandemic, we'll say the words to some degree. We saw that e-commerce explode. Obviously, we were in a different environment. And so, from a directional perspective, we're probably in somewhere between 20 and 30% e-commerce. our business, and that has increased and decreased to some factors, but we continue to see that, and that's another area where technology helps us tremendously in making sure that that's an efficient process. And so when you think about the packaging, the roasting, and those things, technology is really significant in those areas, and shipping costs can then cut into that. So it's still a continuous or a consistent piece of our business. And subscriptions really count for a lot of that too. It's sustaining that relationship with the customer. It's also making that subscription worthy of the value. And so how do you inject the choice of the customer in, as well as variety into that same sort of subscription, so that they're continuing to be interested in the brand, interested in the coffee itself. And so I think we still have a commitment to that substantial investment in e-commerce, because I don't think it will go away. I think the customer has really sort of given us that they will continue to either shop e-commerce or find different ways to interact with us. And so I think it's one that we'll continue to see grow. I know there is still that desire to have a face-to-face interaction, and so we'll see that come back as the sea continues to subside. But that e-commerce is here to stay, and I think the more that we invest in that and make that a wonderful experience for the customer to either continue with something that they're familiar with, or to explore other areas, and how do we inform them about those different varietals that might be available to them.
Thank you, Rod. Damien.
Interestingly saying, recently, because we have opened our flagship store and the roastery in June 2021, recently we have prioritized our focus to e-commerce, and we are starting building and moving forces into e-commerce platform, which is already growing significantly, and we are very happy to it. Obviously, we are at the beginning of the road, so we are learning how to do it, how to present our product in the best way, and how to reach new customers base, how to be attractive in the e-commerce, as we all know that e-commerce just exploded worldwide, and people are very comfortable and confident to shop online. So in our case, it has been significant move towards the e-commerce, and I think this part of the business will be growing much more than shop face-to-face interaction. We don't get me wrong, we do not always focus on those things as well, but e-commerce is becoming a big part of our business.
That's great. Thanks, Damien. Sam.
Yeah, e-commerce is a big reason why we survived through the pandemic. Our e-commerce exploded in 2020 and still is doing like increasingly better and better. I would say pretty similar percentages. It's about 30% of our business. And that's a huge shift from, I don't know the percentage before, but I know it wasn't that. This year, we just had like a summit with our team to set goals for this next year. And all of our collective goal is to grow our e-commerce. And by growing it, we honestly think that this is the future of, it's just a future, like being able to connect with people all across the country and the world when we are just in Seattle is such a powerful thing, and something we don't take very lightly. We don't want to lose that human contact piece of it. So we put a lot of efforts into creating multiple touch points to our e-commerce and our subscriptions. So like when you join our subscription, you don't just get a coffee every month. You get an email from one of our staff members who's asking how the coffee is. Here's a recipe if you want to try it. And in that, there's opportunities to be like, hey, this coffee goes really well with the V60 in this recipe. We sell that on our online shop. Go ahead, pick one up, and we can even schedule a Zoom class with it. And we have like monthly Zoom classes that we offer around that. So we've seen it. It's really opened up an entire door of opportunity for us in the company and our reach, and not just reach in money and being able to make more sales, but reach and connection, which then by proxy, like our primary focus is connection. And then by proxy, we're able to we see like the benefit of that monetarily. But e-commerce is definitely, it's a lot of our focus as a company going into this next year. And for us, it's an opportunity to connect and get creative on how we connect with our guests across the world.
Thank you, Sam. And like following off the back of that, where you said even with the subscriptions and getting creative with that, would you say that was specifically because of the pandemic and the situation it put the business in having to identify ways to connect with your existing customers and new ones alike?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say there's a lot of positives about the pandemic, other than this is like something that was born out of the pandemic for us and has been a huge win. So they're like, despite all just like what a traumatic experience for everybody, this actually became like a very big blessing in disguise for us to be able to connect with people. Because I think now more than ever, we crave that human connection, and I think that's going to be the future. It's like how we can create that human connection in a very virtual world. So we're trying to navigate that as a company, and we don't have it figured out, but we're trying new things. We're seeing what gets good responses. We're seeing what feels good too, like what feels like Vita, what feels like is going to create a connection with those that aren't able to come into our spaces. So I think thanks to the pandemic, the one thing that we really pulled from it is the e-commerce aspect and the subscriptions. The subscriptions, I know you asked about that specifically. Yes. I'm super excited about that because that pulls, like, it's so funny, the relationship between a green buyer like myself and director of copy and also our marketing team. There's always this like tension of like, okay, we want to promote this and do this. And it's like, yeah, but you're like not doing it right. Like this is like what we want to showcase. And it's this constant tension, but through our subscriptions, we're able to come together and like, they give me slots where they're like, okay, nerd out, like just go have fun, talk to everybody, brew some coffee, do what you do. And like, we'll make it pretty. And I'm like, perfect. That sounds great. So we've been able to team up and really make those subscriptions more than just receiving a bag of coffee, which is cool in itself. In my opinion, I would love that. But being able to have the resources to get the most out of that coffee and enjoy the product more, while also feeling connected to the Vita family.
Thank you so much, Sam. I really enjoyed that. So I've got my last question, and we've got 3 minutes, let's say, to get through it. For our audience who may be anxious about the process of implementing new technology, whether it be a new POS system, roasting software management, drum configuration, coffee shop app, what advice do you have for them? I will start with Ron.
I think we started before. Do your homework, research, understand how this will work well for you, understand what it might mean for change. The training is necessary to go through. I think thinking through those pieces, the problem resolution on the back end, if you've got that sort of map set in place, I think you can navigate through any change that you might go through.
Thank you, Ron. Damien?
I could easily, gladly, kindly repeat everything what Ron said. Plus, again, doing your own research.
Yeah. Research. That's key. And Sam?
Yeah, I would just say, don't be scared. This technology is only going to make you better. So dive into it, be uncomfortable, like navigate through it. If it doesn't work, you put it to the side and you move to the next thing. There's no loss in trying new technology. If anything, it's going to be a step in the right direction, and you don't have to have it figured out. If I can tell you anything, no one has it figured out. We're all just trying to get through this together and learn how we can be better. So reach out to your peers. You can reach out to me if I can help. I would love to help. But yeah, don't be scared. Just dive in, have some fun with it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You move to the next thing.
Keep it moving. I really love that. Having said that, honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with all three of you. Thank you so much for answering all the questions, my questions and the audience. Literally, and to the audience, really, if you're ever in New York, if you're in Canada, or you want to go visit Cafe Vita, Nemesis Coffee, or Joe Coffee, please do. I'm sure that you've got a lot from them from this conversation. And honestly, it's been great chatting with them. And I really hope you've enjoyed listening to this. And take care, everybody. Thank you so much for your time again. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.